my initial thought was, what in the world does UDOT have in common with the University of Utah men's basketball program? And then as I was on that conference call, getting some of the background with the organization and starting to think about the combinations, similarities that existed with the team aspect, it certainly became pretty evident. Obviously, it takes an awful lot of moving parts within UDOT to make things happen. And moving parts, vendors, suppliers, drivers, executives, you name it. And the same teamwork needs to take place with our basketball program. I think it's pretty obvious that what we do matters, and I think maybe more in a life or death sense and some real importance with what all you folks are responsible for and keeping things moving and lowering fatalities. Ours is a win and loss situation. A lot of numbers are involved with that. You would think it was life or death with a lot of fans that are out there, but at the end of the day, I'm coaching a sport and a team, and as I remind my young kids at home, it's a game. And the reason that we're playing our game is because the definition of a game is something you can go have fun with. So we try to keep it a little light while we move through that, but I've been really big on this term culture. And I think that's the nuts and bolts of what I'd like to talk about a little bit, maybe give you a little background of some inner workings within our team. And then if you don't mind, I'm going to coach everybody up a little bit at the end, maybe a little bit of motivation and inspiration for us all to do our job a little bit better. But the big buzzword in sports, obviously, whenever you see a coach hired or fired, is always this term culture. I'm going to establish the culture. I'm going to create a culture. However you want to define that term, and that's always been really interesting. I think we know when we're in the middle of a positive culture. I've played 10 years in the NBA, and I would say, and I've done the research on this, 6 of those years I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. And the culture was right, from the top down through the teammates, how we did our business. 4 of those years really could kind of take or leave it. And as I look back and reflect on that, it was because the culture was broken. Now, it's important, it's hard to wrap your hands around it. What is culture? It's more of a feeling that you know things are being done the right way. But I would suggest to everybody that within developing this culture, whoever the top people are, have to create a culture that's parallel with their own thoughts and values. You've got to have your ducks in a row as a leader of that organization, and whatever it is you're going to convey to your employees or create that culture, it's got to be a situation where you're walking the walk and you're not just talking the talk. And I think after a lot of research, I got canned. I was the coach of the Bucks, had about a year and a half off, and I was trying to reflect just exactly, if I could go back in time, what it would be that I would do different, and started doing a bunch of research on that fancy word culture. Brought leadership groups in, been really fortunate. We've had the Navy SEALs in with our team. To me, that's a definition of doing some hard things. Certainly from an individual point of view, to become a SEAL and then to be able to be a part of a team. So that kind of culture we've been stealing a lot of things from. Leadership, a local leadership group, Travis Anderson with Strategic Leadership, has been really influential with us. And what I've learned through this is if the culture is going to be designed within your organization, and it's either going to be designed by design, how you want that culture to be, or it's going to be designed by default. And so it's been real important as one of the leaders of Utah basketball to let's set what the key words are, what we're going to try to live, and how we're going to go about our business. So let's talk a little bit about our program, some of those key words within our program, some of the non-negotiables that we have. Our mission statement has always been the same from the day I was hired. A real popular question back in that time was, how long is it going to take you to get the program up and running again? How many wins is it going to take for you to be successful? And so a common theme for me, I started to reflect on my own successes as a basketball player. I've never been a big goal-setting long term, and that might go in opposition to what some of the organizations talk about, setting goals. I've been more of maybe a dreamer at the end of the road, but I've always been very much more of a one day at a time mentality. So it's been pretty easy for me over the last 4+ years. As people ask, I always talk about, man, we just got to wake up in the morning, get a little bit better today, obviously fix what's broken within the organization, accentuate the positives that are going on. You return the phone calls that you need to return, clean off your desk, and then you kind of go home and you wake up and you do it again. And I think if you continue that grind, we talk about it all the time in our program, keep chopping wood. It's never going to get easy. It's always a process where we continue to go. So that mission statement has remained the same. Each day is a jump ball. I'm big into some of these sayings, but I think I dreamed this one up. Each day is a jump ball. You wake up, you pop your feet out of bed, and man, somebody's, to use the basketball term, somebody's throwing the ball up. You try to win the tip, and then you try to win the game. And that's been very important. I've also been, one of the other real popular questions is, man, how did you turn it around so fast? And that one always makes me want to chuckle, because 4 years might seem like maybe a fast little turnaround, but the way I look at it, it's 1,500 days. That gets to be a little bit long. So this, again, maybe some of the successes we've had have not happened overnight. You're all in that same situation. You know, our first year, when I came to the program, we had 8 players that defected from the program, left the program. One of my very first practices with our team, I was thinking about this afternoon as I was putting some notes together. First practices with the team, I was excited, to be Utah basketball, have an opportunity to get the guys together for a 2-hour workout. And there were a lot of guys at that time that were on the fence. They hadn't necessarily left yet. And I remember conducting this practice in the Huntsman Center, and it's the weirdest thing. If you've probably never been on the floor, but if you're standing directly in the middle of the Huntsman Center talking, it actually kind of sounds like this earpiece thing, this microphone, where it just reverberates. And so we were in the middle of this practice, and it wasn't going well. And I knew that I had my hands full. And I've also been a real avid dreamer. So as I'm in the middle of this practice, and I hear the noise coming back, and it was such a surreal feeling that my first thought was, I'm just dreaming. And I remember kind of waiting for myself to wake up. Like, it can't possibly be this bad. And it was bad. And then as we went through some time, players were coming in and saying, I think I'm going to leave. I want my release. And we signed all those releases. We wanted guys that wanted to be a part of Utah basketball. They went on their way, and we recruited a good group of guys, some hard workers. But at the end of the day, the kids that we signed in May had already missed the November signing date and the April signing date. So anybody that was left over in May, let's be realistic about it, weren't the cream of the crop kind of guys. So we took on a bunch of kids with chips on their shoulder, worked extremely hard. We didn't make any promises about that being a multi-year contract or a multi-year scholarship for them, but we were going to get better, and we were going to get them better and have as much fun as we could possibly have. And that first year was a little bit rough. We won 6 games. We were talked about nationally as the worst power conference team, so the top 5 or 6 conferences in the country, we were notably the worst, ranked 300 in some. Some pretty dark days. When I was first hired, excited again, family flies in to Salt Lake City, and we do the big press conference, and I'm spending the entire day with the media and different factions of the campus. And I got back to the hotel, the Marriott near the university, and I walked into the room. My in-laws were there, kids were there, and as I walked in the room, a couple of my young kids were on the bed crying. And I was like, well, this wasn't what I expected to come back to in our hotel. And, my mother-in-law loves reading the newspaper. I'm not a big fan of it. And actually, we made a little family pact that day that we weren't going to pick up any of the newspapers and depend on them telling us how we were doing or how we weren't doing. But my mother-in-law gave and actually helped some of my boys read the article, and I got raked over the coals. What a terrible hire it was. So things didn't start off that well, and there were plenty of opportunities along the way. We ended up removing our best player from the team. He ranked number 1 in the country in efficiency and top player per minutes per team, and that young man's name was Jiggy Watkins. Most of you guys don't even remember, but he was a really good point guard. And what happened with that was Jiggy was continuously late to our meetings, couldn't be on time. And I thought, as some of those non-negotiables that you talk about in your program, you can't keep sacrificing some of the things that need to be important. And it was one of the hardest decisions I made as a basketball coach, and it took me about 2 or 3 days to decide it, that Jiggy needed to go. So we continued to pay for his scholarship the rest of that year. He stayed in Salt Lake, actually came to a number of our games, and finished and got his degree. And as hard as that was, one of the most rewarding times of my time here at Utah was on graduation night. That young man came back with his mother and his guardian with the degree in hand and came into my office and was crying his eyes out. And I told him when I removed him from our team, as he said, "Coach, you can't take this away from me. This is the most important thing in the world to me," and crying. And I said, "I have to do it, Jiggy." And I said, "I need to leave you with this thought, is that hopefully this is a lesson in life, because beyond winning games, we're trying to teach kids some lessons." And I said, the next time that the most important thing in your life is there in front of you, you've got to handle your business a little bit better. And so he came back in the office again with the graduation, the paper in hand, and in tears, and he said, "Coach, that was the best thing that anybody ever did for me." So sometimes the tough love is very important in how you handle your employees and your players. I had some other notes about how tough things were. I don't think I need to even go into it. Year 2, year 3, year 4. That's not the important part of it. But I'm going to talk about some of the core values. And this one didn't used to make the list for the Utes because it was something that I had as a player, and it was just a given. To me, it was like putting your basketball shoes on or breathing. It was that you were going to work hard at what you did. And sometimes we need to teach these kids how to work hard. So everything we do, whether you're on the court, you're in the classroom, you're in the weight room, you're in the community, you're standing up here talking in front of people, whatever it is you're doing, you do it to your fullest and the hard work. My wife had a great point years ago, because I always talked about how I worked hard. And she said, well, it's one thing to work hard, but it's another thing to work smart. And that really resonated with me. There's coaches around the country that sleep in their office. We just built a beautiful new facility, and they wanted to know if I wanted to hide a bed in my office. And I said, man, if I need to sleep in my office, I've got problems, because you can get your work done. And I think about this. We don't have a big board up here, but picture it as a 4-square. This really helped me when I first got the job, and it's helped me to kind of compartmentalize some things. And forgive me if I'm coaching you, but that's kind of the nature of it. You have 4 squares, and you've got important items down this column, not important items down this column. And then you've got, across this way, you've got urgent columns and not urgent columns. And it's really important as you're working smart to go through kind of a daily, okay, obviously you want to spend most of your time in the one quadrant, which is urgent and is very important. And life can get a little interesting sometimes. Like when I first got the job, I was just about at the brink, not sure I made the right decision coming here, because when you take over a program, or maybe you get challenged with a change in a job or whatever the case might be, you find yourself in the urgent column and the important column with an awful lot of things, and there's only so much time in a day. But as things mellow out, that's really helped me to kind of prioritize as you're moving through that. Here's another tidbit for you, which was great in terms of time management. And I think we can all use this. It applies to all of us. If you can picture a big pie with about 8 slices in it, and I think we can all fill in each slice with the real important things in our life: family, faith, job, you name it. And you have a little piece of pie that's obviously leisure time as well. And this one kind of hit me over the head like a sledgehammer when somebody brought it to my attention. And the theme behind this pie, it's not really self-explanatory, because the theme was eat the whole pie. So I think that's where a lot of us make mistakes, is you're always trying to eat the whole pie. And you might be in the middle of work, but you're thinking about family. Or you might be in church and you're thinking about, and it just goes on and on. And so the 2 concepts that I took away from this: when you're in one of those sections of that pie, you got to be all in. Kind of what I talked about with our players. When you're in the middle of practice, you can't be daydreaming about your homework. When you're in the academic center, you can't be daydreaming. And we all know how that goes. When I pull into the driveway now, I'm not on my cell phone. When I pull in my driveway, the recruiting calls are made. And when I walk in, I've usually got a couple of 7-year-old girls that are excited to see me. Not as excited as my sons, but the 7-year-olds are usually there before I can get out of my car. And so it's on. It's time to eat that piece of pie, the whole pie. Think about that a little bit when you're in the middle of some stuff, and that's going to help your efficiency. I think another part of that pie that I thought about is a lot of times our section for leisure and fun and games is too big. It's like a double piece of pie. And so we end up spending a lot of time there when maybe we need to be more efficient. And everybody needs to have fun, don't get me wrong. I mean, we talk a lot about playing hard and working hard and maximizing both, but I think some people need to shrink their social media time, whatever it is, the texting, all of that kind of stuff. So 2 parts to that. Make sure you're eating the whole pie, focused on some of the things that are important. The other thing, leadership-wise, because there's a lot of different tiers of people that are in here. You might be an executive, you might be in the middle, you might be someone, near the bottom that's taking a lot of direction. This helped me as a leader, and it's the DCI principle. DCI, because I get a little bit scrambled at times too, and the D stands for decision maker. And we have a red cube. It's like a die in our office that has D on 2 sides and 2 C's and 2 I's. The decision maker has the D. The C's are for the consultants. And the I's need to be informed. So there's a lot of times things come up in our daily working where I'll have coaches come to me and ask me something, and I'll just tell them quite simply, you got the D. Just make sure you give me an I. Or, hey guys, I need to get to the bottom of this. I need all of you to be C's and consultants, get as much information as you can, and then give me the D. So we use this little lingo, but I think in a pretty complex system like UDOT is, I think sometimes you can get a little bit more efficient, and that's been really great for me. We just toss this little die around the office, and it's helped me, and I think it helps clear up, provide a little bit more clarity. So got organization, we got hard work, time management. One of the words here that's probably in most people's mission statement or culture definition is the term perseverance. And this one hits home with me because it always hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of things that have taken place my entire time getting through this. And there's millions of books out there about how to get through things when they're hard, right? And here's one of my favorite sayings, because I love to play poker. It's not about playing a great hand, for any poker players out there, because we can all play a pair of pocket aces pretty well. It's about playing the hand that you're dealt great. And we bring that up weekly, if not more. There's going to be bumps in the road. That's one thing we pretty much know for sure. It's not going to be easy. And if it's easy, it's probably not that much fun. But it's how you respond to some of these adverse situations. The other thing, and I kind of dreamed it up this year because for 3 years, the University of Utah basketball is talking about persevering and slugging it out, and we can all pick up those books, and man, you got to keep fighting. Well, then all of a sudden you have a year maybe like we had this last year. It's not really about perseverance anymore. But the theme there is that your model can't change. You're still chopping wood. And you don't find those. That's why so many movie stars and rock stars and people sit back and go, how could you possibly have a drug overdose? Or how could you possibly be stealing purses? Or everybody's clueless. Like, what is wrong with these people, right? There's not that much information out there on how to handle success and how to handle wealth. Nobody's interested in reading it. So it can be just as complicated when you're not persevering, but maybe when you're feeling a little success. And then within our program, we have 2 big words that we talk about all the time, and it's being humble and being hungry and sticking with it. So if you think, my experience is just about the time you think you got life figured out is when it jumps up and bites you in the butt. So equally important is being able to handle some success. This next word, and then I don't want to ramble too much longer, is probably my favorite within a program and an organization, and it seems like a real soft word. It's compassion. Okay, and this one takes on a special definition for me. When I was young, my mom was diagnosed with Hodgkin's, and that was back at the time that you didn't survive Hodgkin's. She spent the last couple years of her life in a wheelchair, and she taught us compassion. I tell you what, if you know that your mom is not going to be here that long, you learn compassion. And if you can imagine being a parent of a 6-year-old when you find out you're not going to live very long, you teach compassion because you want to take advantage of every day. And so, again, within our basketball program, everybody here's got a story. And it's not always easy. And I'll tell you one thing, and I've used this analogy with basketball camps before. You got a group of campers sitting around the floor, and I said, hey, Joey, how would you treat Johnny over here if we told you before camp that he only had a week to live? And the first people think, well, man, I'd do anything to make a connection, make a difference. Well, let me tell you guys something, and I think you all know this. The one thing we know for sure about our existence on this planet is that it's going to come to an end. And so it's important as we're walking around a room or dealing with people that you treat everybody with that kind of compassion. Because we all know a lot of examples of, man, I wish I would have known he had a problem. Maybe I would have tried to reach out and touch him before he made that mistake. Whatever the case might be. And so you got to treat the janitor the same way you treat the president. And I'm proud to say that my kids, I get more excited about feedback from our teachers, from my children's classes, about, man, I saw him on the playground. He was playing with that, disabled child and teaching him. That's super important. And I'm really proud of our guys. They're getting the gist of this. I get emails and phone calls from people all over the country. When we're at the Pac-12 tournament in Vegas, when we're all there together in the MGM, and there's 12 teams, and it whittles down to 6 and then 4, and you're still alive, and you're coming across all these fans from other schools, there's something special about being compassionate to people and listening and looking them in the eye. The flip side of that compassion, and this may be why I like the word so much, is because you can get a couple definitions in it, is the Latin term where compassion came from, and that's to come with passion, with whatever it is you're doing. Attack this day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. It's one of my favorite sayings. You got to get into it. And I'm really lucky. Let's face it. I'm well paid. I get to make an impact on young men. I get to coach, teach, be a mentor at that school, which is awesome, new facility, and I'm doing what I love. That's the reality of it. So I feel really blessed and lucky. Maybe not the case for everybody here in the room. That's the reality. The way I see it, we got a couple choices. If you don't feel like your buttons are being pushed and you're going through the motions and it's kind of a waste, then you're one of those energy takers and complainers, then I say quit. This is what I would, and I've done it. I've done it twice. I've quit basketball jobs, which goes against the grain because, man, once you get out of this industry, you don't get back. Quit, or else quit complaining about it and try to be the best at whatever it is you're doing and be an energy giver. There's nothing worse when you get into that cycle. Come with passion. And then I think lastly, most important with whatever station you have in life is that you're the best at it. Tony Dungy has a great book about all his championships and his path to success. He's said there's nothing magical about winning championships or having an NFL championship ring. It's about doing the ordinary things extraordinarily well. Sometimes we get a little complicated with the game plan, and it still gets down to some fundamental stuff. You know, within our workings as a team, certainly, that would be advice to you. And again, it gets back to our mission statement. Wake up each day, try to get a little bit better, and you hope that that graph is trending in an upward direction. Now, all of a sudden, if we don't win 27, because we've won 6 games, 15 games, 21 games, and then 26 games last year. If we don't win 27 games this year, that doesn't mean that we failed. It's not always going to be trending upward, but our key is to kind of rewrite our own story with this team and remaining very humble and hungry throughout the process. When I was a janitor, that was one of my first jobs, and I thought I was the best janitor on the planet. I mean, I was proud of waxing the floor. I did extra stuff that they didn't expect me to do. I was buying, sealing, cleaning floors. I mowed lawns for a number of summers because I wanted to have that money in my pocket. And I still think I can out-mow anybody when it comes to mowing a lawn. Whatever it is you're doing, you know, edge it, whatever. The line's got to be perfect. But get after it in whatever it is you're doing and become the best person on the planet at that. The last thing I'll just close with, and then a little challenge for you, and if anybody has any questions, it would be great. I ask our basketball team, and they take this really seriously, and I've heard them repeat it, which is kind of cool when they start sounding like the coach. But they're in an unbelievable situation and fortunate with their scholarships to be over at that school, the University of Utah. And I ask each one of our guys to be ambassadors. There's about 15 players, 8 coaches. We got a real small group. And we ask them to be ambassadors throughout their community with whatever it is they're doing. And they take a lot of pride in that, being our representatives. We wear these little black wristbands that have DNA on them. It says DNA. We only made about 50 of them. It wasn't a mass production, but we handed our guys those bracelets, little rubber bracelets. And then when you flip the bracelet over, it says different, noticeable, and appealing. And I would challenge you guys within UDOT, whatever part of the machine you're responsible for, to think about that on a daily basis. Think about your DNA. Do something to be a little different, noticeable, and appealing. Okay, I'd like to say thank you to Carlos for having me. It's an honor to be up here talking. And with that, if anybody has any questions, be happy to field some questions. I know we've got the U over here. Who's going to make sure Shane wears his jersey on game day? Carlos. Oh, you're the boss. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions? Anything at all?
Outside of the physical attributes of a player, when you're recruiting, what are the characteristics, the values you look for in the young men?
No, that's a great question. Beyond the physical side of things, what do we look for in young men? And I think a lot of it comes down to having some character. Not that everybody's going to be perfect. There's a lot of 18-year-old kids out there that don't know what they don't know. I watch a lot AAU basketball and high school basketball. Brandon Taylor's a little guard that's playing for us right now that wasn't recruited very highly, but I saw him play about 3 or 4 high school games. And when I watched Brandon warm up, he warmed up like it was his last game. He was focused. When the game was over, he had this group of kids that came over and gravitated toward him, all walks of life. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about with being an ambassador or a mayor. And he has it. And today we have a practice, and he was unbelievable. A kid we're really going to miss. And we've got people in LA calling us all the time. Oh, hey, we got a guy here that's so much better than Brandon. There's a lot of things that don't get seen. You know, Brandon didn't grow up in a two-parent home. He had a lot. His uncle and brother were murdered in drug deals in LA. This is home for him. We give them a month off, and he comes back about a week into it, and he wants to be here. And so it's really hard. If it were an exact science, I think we'd all be hitting home runs when it came to recruits, but we just kind of evaluate, behind the scenes. If a kid's cut of the right stuff, you kind of lob them up some questions that gives them a chance to be one of those energy takers. We just had a kid on campus this weekend who we knew all the background on him. Gang-related stuff, really had the curve. I mean, you talk about perseverance. And we gave him every opportunity to sit at a number of meals with us and complain about his environment. And he was grateful for where he was. He's living in a bedroom with 3 other boys on a basketball team. They don't have any money. They don't have any food. And I said, well, how do you make sure you eat? And he said, well, when I do get food, I put it under my bed. And I make sure nobody gets it. And I know what's going on there because I've talked to their coach. And that's a kid that should probably complain. And so that's also a young man that's going to be joining us as of this afternoon. So it's pretty cool to get into the behind-the-scenes stuff and try to figure out. And that's the first thing I told our coaching staff. 4 years ago when we were together, we were sitting at a table. Everybody's gathered up, freshly hired. Everybody's a little nervous and new. And the exact comment I made, and I've said it now for a couple of years to everybody after we did the introductions, is just let's get this perfectly clear. We're not going to recruit any turds. That was my exact quote, because this life is hard enough to figure out basketball-wise to be dealing with kids that are hard to change. Again, we got kids making mistakes, and we can help them through it, but we try to start with a pretty solid background to begin with. Yeah, I assume everybody could hear that. That's a great question, and it's asked pretty commonly. I feel fortunate to have been able to do both. I'm one of the few people that can answer the question, and I've chosen college. And I think 2 things when I talk about culture. A lot of times in the NBA, unless you're Greg Popovich or Pat Riley, it's out of your control. And you can try to get that culture created as best as you possibly can. And if you have a general manager or an owner that you're having a hard time lining some of that stuff up with, that's very problematic. The other thing is, probably the most valuable and rewarding part of my job, obviously if you're going to a Sweet 16 or something, that's a special memory, but is having an opportunity to have an impact on a young man that maybe without you otherwise wouldn't be able to have that kind of impact. In the NBA, 9 out of 10 or more NBA players have already had their mentors, whoever it is that made a difference that helped them to get there. So the NBA guys typically aren't interested in building a relationship with the head coach. But in college, this is really cool to have a chance to do that. And that those 2 things, culture, mentoring, and then I would say thirdly, with 5 kids of my own, if you're an NBA coach with 5 kids, you can pretty much kiss a bunch of time goodbye because it's a hard, grinding schedule. At least in college, it's hard, but it's something that you can kind of balance out. And you're not gone for weeks at a time. You're gone every other week for 3 or 4 nights. So it's for me, it's perfect. Good question. I wish I would have brought some shirts. The best question award. Yes, sir. Say that again? My strangest recruiting experience. Oh boy. That's a good one. I don't know. I'll give you this one, I think. We recruited a young man out of Vegas that was a 4-star point guard, and he committed to us at an early age. And we found out when we were in Brazil. We took a foreign tour, and the team was warming up. I took a picture of our coaches on the bench because I thought this is one of those turning points. And our coaches weren't they were all sad sitting on the bench, and we're trying to warm our guys up. And I remember looking at the bench at the coaches, and I said, "What in the world is going on? You guys look like your dog just died." And they said, "Well, we just read on social media that this said players decommitted from our school." So after a lot of work, you'd always like to recruit guys that if they're going to decommit, they might call you in person rather than you're reading it on Twitter. So they thought the world stopped revolving. And I remember looking at him and I said, "Guys, everything happens for a reason. I don't know what," and I was really hurt as well. I said, "Everything happens for a reason. We just got to get back in the saddle and keep grinding." And long story short, that scholarship that kid didn't take was the scholarship that we used for DeLon Wright, who was now he's playing with the Raptors. So, sometimes when you think that you've hit rock bottom and it couldn't get any worse, that philosophy that everything happens for a reason and you just got to keep chopping wood, I think that's one that's really ironic when you look at the timing of it. But some of the stuff you can't make up that goes on, and it gets to be a little comical at times. Yeah.
So maybe 2 years ago, Jordan Lethbridge was shooting around at West Jordan Rec Center and invited my son to shoot with him. And my son came home so happy that this really cool guy was helping him. And then I started to find out who he was and all the affiliations and so forth. What I'm curious about is how are you encouraging your players to give back and be involved in the community and try to mentor, maybe not so officially, but unofficially, and guide younger youth to strive for excellence and be better at what they're doing in their everyday lives?
It's the coolest part of it, but it's something that you have to make a point of emphasis. I don't know if everybody heard the comments, but her son was kind of taken under the wing by Jordan Leverage a couple years ago, who was shooting, and I think they need to see us doing it as coaches. Again, you stop and you talk to everybody because you never know who you're talking to. And I said before, everybody's got a story. So, we talked about it tonight after practice. Again, being in the ambassadors. And you got a special privilege of being able to make not only do I have an opportunity to make a difference as a coach, but when they see me making a difference maybe with them, then hopefully they're going to go pass it on. So that's some of the coolest stuff. I mean, the list goes on and on. I got an email from a UPS driver in the snowstorm that said, "Man, I had all these boxes and my crate tipped over," and he was trying to haul boxes into somebody in the business building or something, and one of our players stopped and saw him and helped him deliver this load. Took like 15 minutes out of his time, and he just wanted me to know. And that's the kind of stuff, and we can't be holding our hands out. When we first got here, it was like, "Hey, come and watch us play," because we all want a packed house, and we've got a great attendance at this point now, but we can't be just sitting there with our hands out expecting people to show up. So part of that is to reach out, maybe make a difference. Now your son hopefully wants to get season tickets, and So anyway, it's all part of the plan, having that compassion and being different, noticeable, and appealing. Yeah. In the back corner. You know, I think the key for that, I think talk is cheap more than anything. And I've made mistakes, and I think you need to show vulnerability when you make mistakes. You know, one of the things I read recently that was really cool, and it hit home with me, is if things aren't going well and you're in an adverse situation, maybe year one here when we won 6 games, when Brandon Taylor was a freshman, if he sees you acting foolish when things aren't going well, then how are you going to talk to him about persevering? And the quote that I read was, if you act that way when things aren't going well, you'll never be able to enjoy any success. And that was like, yeah, you're right about that. Because if you were a real jerk when things weren't going well. So I think one of my best traits is probably trying to stay on somewhat of an even keel. And I learned that maybe from being a player in the NBA, and one of the things we always talked about was you're never as good as you think you are if you have a great game, and you're never as bad as you think you are if you had a bad game, but you just try to remain consistent and be a pro. And so we talk a little bit about it, but we know we're being watched, you know, and that's the thing I think that you try to set a good example. That's far more important. We have a saying, your actions are speaking so loud I can't hear what you're saying. So your actions are really what's key to that, and hopefully we can provide a little bit of that leadership for them. Yes, sir. Well, I'm really lucky, number one. When did I decide I wanted to be a head coach? The last 4 or 5 years of my NBA playing career, I tore my knee up, thing blew up like a hand grenade, and I was kind of dragging one leg around for the last 4 or 5 years that I played. You know, the bad side was I dealt with that injury. But the flip side of that, if I wouldn't have dealt with that injury, I wouldn't have played on 4 different teams my last 4 years. And getting back to what I talked about with everything happening for a reason, it was real easy to have a pity party. But I played for the Bulls for a year around some unbelievable people. I mean, my top 5 all-star team, John Stockton would be my point guard. These are teammates of mine. Michael Jordan would be my shooting guard. Scottie Pippen would be my small forward, Karl Malone, the power forward, and Shaq would be your center. And so that's, you know, it's like you look back at that baseball era with Mantle, and I played at a pretty special time. And beyond those teammates was some great coaches. And Phil Jackson, when I played for the Bulls, he actually, he used to call me out of the locker room and have me come in and sit in coaches' meetings when I was still playing. And he made me a scout at the end of one year because I had an emergency appendectomy at the end of, you know, what else can you come up with to not be able to play? But I woke up in an Atlanta hotel room and had to get rushed and have my appendix taken out, and he turned me into a scout at that point and kind of exposed me to it. And then I went back to college, got my degree, and I was going to go out in the real world, and I became a financial advisor for a few months and a real estate agent for a few months. And it's like, man, I don't want to do this. I can't ask my friends for money, you know. And everybody in the basketball business said, you know, you're not just, the biggest fear for people is to hire a former NBA player as a coach because they think you're not going to work. You know, so you're thinking, man, I got all these connections and people I know, I should be able to be a coach. And advice I got from a lot of them is you got to go back and you got to prove that you're willing to do it. So I went back to my alma mater, University of Montana, and I made $12,000 a year for 2 years as an assistant coach. And then I ended up quitting there. And got hired as an assistant at Old Dominion, worked out there, and got hired as a CBA coach in Boise, Idaho. And I played on the CBA team, and I had every opportunity to be one of those jerks at the end of my career because I should have been playing and I wasn't. And, carrying bags off the bus, and did some little things as a player where I was trying to be an energy giver. And it made a difference with the owner of the CBA team. That was probably my biggest break. He called me and said, "Hey, do you want to coach the Idaho Stampede? $48,000 a year. Do you want to move from Norfolk, Virginia to Boise and with these kids?" My wife thought I was crazy. She's like, "I don't know if you're cut out for this." Seriously, she was, and we took our team to the championship game of the CBA. And the following year, the University of Montana head coaching job opened up, which I never would have got had I not been in the CBA, because one of the prerequisites is they wanted head coach experience. Went back to Montana, and we went to the NCAA tournament a couple years. Assistant job with the Bucks opened up, took that. They fired the head coach, made me the head coach for a couple years. I got canned. Went to New Jersey as an assistant coach for a year. And then the Utah job opened up, and fortunately Dr. Hill called. But to be honest with you, there's a lot of people that are just grinding and getting after it. So I can't say this was my lifelong dream, but man, it's the thing I miss most is being in the locker room. Former players miss being a part of the locker room. So this is unbelievable to be a part of that in the situation I'm in. But I'd be lying if I said I had it all penciled in. That it? Yes. No worries. Anything overall, life-wise? The biggest obstacle that I've ever overcome, man, I'll tell you what, it's tough when you're 8 and you lose your mom. That one was a stinger, and then things got a little bit interesting after that with the stepmom, and it's kind of a long story. It's been a little bit of the Hard Knocks deal, to be honest with you. I don't know if anybody'd ever buy it, but my wife keeps telling me, "You got to write a book," because it's not normal. And I truly believe that there's divine intervention. When I look back at all the stuff that's gone on and how easily I could be doing something different, I've heard a little voice in my head for a lot of years. And it's a combination, I think, of maybe my mom and God. I think sometimes people hear voices and they don't realize where the voice is coming from. I've come to realize here lately that it's actually God and my mom. So that's helped me iron a few things out. But, thank goodness for basketball. That's what I keep saying is without that outlet to get through some of those things, that's what's been really cool, is it's a way to kind of escape on the lines of the court and have a team and do some of those things. So I probably don't need to bore you with some of those obstacles, but she hasn't been easy. Got to persevere. Yeah. Oh, good question. No championships for me. I kicked a field goal right between the two three-peats. Dennis Rodman replaced me. So yeah, I didn't get a chance. I actually had that on my resume for 3 straight years. If you want to go to the NBA Finals, you need to bring Krzysztofiak on your team, and then it'll guarantee you the year after he leaves, you'll go to the finals. That happened 3 straight years. So no championships. Great to be with you guys. Thank you so much. It's really cool. I wanted to, the joke here was that I was a little late with traffic, and I couldn't make a UDOT joke. I actually punched it into my Garmin as the South Town Center, and it got me there late with the traffic, and I was in the mall parking lot, and I realized I probably wasn't making a speech in there. So sorry for making y'all wait a little bit, but enjoyed the evening. Thanks for having me.
We'd like to thank everybody tonight for staying. Tomorrow morning we have sessions starting at 8 o'clock. Please don't forget that we have a breakfast also, 7 o'clock, 7:30. Thank you very much. Please drive safe. Go Red.